In the heart of Africa's desert, where the sands whisper ancient secrets and the wind carries stories long forgotten, there once rose an empire of warriors, scholars, and kings. An empire that ruled for 1,000 years, yet few remember its name, Kanem-Bornu. Before Mali's gold dazzled the world, before Songhai built its towers, before even the kingdoms of Benin or Oyo took shape, there was Kanem. Born of desert grit and bound by faith, it stood as one of Africa's oldest empires, stretching across what we now call Chad, Nigeria, Niger, and Libya. Here on the edges of the Sahara, men learned to tame the sands. They built cities from dust. They traded with Egypt, with Tripoli, with empires across the sea. And from these sands came kings who would carve their names into eternity. Long before the chronicles of Islam, long before the Arabs ventured south, there was life around Lake Chad, a lake vast as the horizon, the beating heart of Central Africa. Here, water birthed civilizations. From these fertile shores came the Sayo civilization, builders and smiths, whose bronze figures and terracotta sculptures still whisper of forgotten glory. They fished the waters, tilled the soil, and forged weapons of iron, leaving behind the soul from which Kanem would rise. As centuries passed, tribes wandered the desert, the Zagawa, the Kanembu, and others seeking fortune and faith. They gathered near the lake, where life was possible, and there a kingdom was born. Small at first, but destined for greatness. The first kings of Kanem were called the Dugawa, rulers before Islam, before the world knew their name. They led through tradition, through spirit, through the unseen world of ancestors. The Dugawa ruled not from stone palaces, but from tents and fortresses of earth. Their strength was in unity, in the caravan routes they controlled and the loyalty of their clans. By the 8th century, the Dugawa had forged alliances across the desert. They traded salt from Bilma, horses from the north, and slaves from the savannah. Gold and ivory flowed through their markets, and soon the world began to notice. But Kanem's power was not built on trade alone. It was built on spirit, on belief that the ruler carried divine power, chosen by the ancestors to keep balance between desert and life. They called their land Kanem, the land of the south. Their capital, Njimi, became a beacon in the sands. And under the Dugawa, Kanem grew, from a collection of clans into an empire. The Dugawa kings were fierce. They fought raiders from the east, the nomads from the north, and rivals across the lake. Every victory strengthened their rule. Every defeat taught them endurance. Soon Kanem controlled the crossroads of Africa, where north met south and east met west. Caravans bound for Egypt and Libya passed through Kanem's lands, paying tribute to its kings. With wealth came order. The Dugawa established councils of nobles, judges, and warriors. They governed through alliances, ensuring each clan had a voice. Njimi became the throne city, a place of power, wisdom, and fear. But change was coming from the north. From Tripoli, from Cairo, from the heart of Islam, traders, scholars, and pilgrims began to arrive. They spoke of a single God, of scripture, of justice beyond the tribe. The Dugawa were wary, yet intrigued. For centuries they had ruled through spirit and tradition. Now a new power whispered through the desert winds, the power of faith and knowledge. This was the beginning of a transformation that would change Kanem forever. From this moment on, the empire would no longer belong to the spirits of the ancestors alone, but to the Book of Islam and the Sword of Destiny. In the next century, Kanem would awaken again, reborn under a new faith and under a dynasty that would rule for 700 years. They would be called the Sayfawa, and their legacy would echo across the Sahara. The 11th century. A new light dawns over the sands of Kanem. Merchants from the north bring not just goods, but a message. A faith born in the deserts of Arabia, now carried by camels across the Sahara. For centuries, the Dugawa kings had ruled through ancient traditions. But now whispers of a new power reached their courts. A faith that promised unity beyond clan and tribe. A belief that could bind desert and savanna under one God. Sometime around the year 1086, a king named Humay ibn Abd al-Jalil took a step that would change the empire's destiny. He embraced Islam, and with it, a new identity for Kanem. The old line of the Dugawa ended. A new dynasty was born, the Sayfawa, claiming descent from a legendary Arab hero, Saif ibn di Yazan, who had once fought demons in Arabian tales. In this legend, Kanem found legitimacy and purpose. Its kings now traced their divine right not just to the ancestors, but to the very lineage of faith. The Sayfawa brought order and structure. They replaced oral rule with written law. They sent ambassadors to North Africa and Mecca. Kanem was no longer an isolated desert kingdom. It had joined the world of Islam. Under the Sayfawa, Kanem entered its first golden era. Faith became the fire that forged expansion. Warriors rode north into the Sahara, south into the savannah, and west into the Hausa lands. They conquered not just with the sword, but with the word. Islamic judges called qadis followed behind the armies, bringing new laws, new schools, new justice. Caravans multiplied, now bearing salt, gold, leather, and slaves. Kanem became the middle kingdom of the Sahara, a bridge between the black kingdoms of the south and the Arab powers of the north. In the capital city of Njimi, knowledge became the new weapon of kings. Mosques rose beside palaces. Schools of Arabic learning spread across Kanem, teaching law, science, and philosophy. The empire became a sanctuary for scholars and traders. Letters from Cairo and Tripoli arrived with news of the wider world. For the first time, Kanem saw itself not as a desert outpost, but as part of a greater civilization. But greatness invites envy, and power always comes with a price. Over the centuries, the Sayfawa line grew long, too long. Princes fought for the throne. Brothers plotted against brothers. Civil wars weakened Kanem's unity, even as its lands expanded. And from the east, a fierce enemy emerged. The Balala, desert warriors who challenged Kanem's might. They struck with fury, raiding Njimi and forcing the Sayfawa to flee. By the 14th century, the empire that had once ruled the desert was driven from its cradle. The capital Njimi fell. The once mighty kings became wanderers in their own land. But Kanem's story did not end in the desert. The Sayfawa carried their legacy westward, across the lake, into the land of Bornu. There, amid fertile plains and rivers, the Sayfawa rebuilt. They established new cities, Ngazargamu, Benin Ngazargamu, and countless forts to guard the empire's rebirth. In exile, they found strength. Bornu became the new heart of the empire, stronger, richer, and more unified than ever before. It was a resurrection, the second life of Kanem-Bornu. The Sayfawa learned from their fall. They strengthened their rule with faith, discipline, and knowledge. Their new capital in Bornu became a fortress of Islam and a beacon of power. And though the old capital of Njimi was lost to the sands, its memory remained, carried in the hearts of the Kanembu and the Kanuri people, who would forever call themselves children of the empire. From the ashes of Kanem rose Bornu, stronger, wiser, and more enduring, a reborn empire ready to face the world. And soon, under one man, a leader whose name would echo across the Sahara, the Kanem-Bornu Empire would reach the height of its glory. His name was Mai Idris Alooma, and under his reign, the desert would once again bow to Bornu.
The dawn breaks over Bornu. Our warriors await.
The 16th century. From the heart of Bornu, a new sun rises, a ruler destined to carve greatness from chaos. His name, Mai Idris Alooma, warrior, reformer, visionary, the man who would forge the Kanem-Bornu Empire into Africa's desert superpower. When Alooma ascended the throne in the late 1500s, Bornu was strong, but restless. Tribal disputes simmered, borders trembled, trade faltered. He saw what his ancestors could not, that faith and discipline could forge unity, and unity could command the desert. Alooma combined the mind of a scholar with the heart of a warrior. He prayed before battle and planned like a strategist of empires. He reformed the army, introducing firearms and armored cavalry. Iron replaced hide, gunpowder thundered across the plains. No longer mere tribesmen, Bornu's warriors became an organized machine of conquest. Alooma built fortresses at every frontier, stationed garrisons along the trade roads, and trained spies to report from distant lands. Every step of the desert became part of his dominion. But his greatest conquests were not of land, but of the soul. Alooma made faith the backbone of his rule. He enforced Sharia law, built mosques across the empire, and invited scholars from Cairo and Fezzan. Justice, once the weapon of the strong, became the shield of the weak. Bornu became not just a kingdom, but a civilization of order, learning, and devotion. Under Alooma, trade flourished like never before. Salt from Bilma, horses from Fezzan, ivory, leather, and slaves from the south. Bornu's wealth glittered across Africa's map. His envoys reached far, even to the Ottoman Turks. He exchanged gifts with sultans and scholars alike, proving that Africa's empires were equal partners in the world's destiny. He ruled with discipline. Stealing, rebellion, corruption, all met swift justice. But mercy was his strength. Captured foes were offered peace if they embraced order. Even the Fulani, the Tuareg, the Hausa, all respected the Mai of Bornu. In an age of endless war, Alooma built roads instead of walls. Paths that carried not just trade, but trust. At its height, Kanem-Bornu stretched from the edge of the Sahara to the forests of the Niger. It commanded the Sahel, dominated the trade of nations, and radiated faith and learning through every caravan route. This was Africa's desert empire, where intellect met courage and kings ruled not only by power, but by purpose. Yet even the greatest flame must fade. After decades of victories, Alooma's long reign neared its end. He left behind peace, faith, and prosperity, a rare legacy in the history of empires. With his passing, Bornu stood proud, the mightiest realm between the Sahara and the Niger. But the sands of time never rest. Without Alooma's guiding hand, cracks began to form. Successors lacked his vision. Rivals vied for control. The empire endured, but the fire dimmed. Beyond the horizon, new powers were rising. The Fulani reformers, the Europeans on the coast. Bornu would soon face trials unlike any before. But for a moment in history, 1,000 years after Kanem first rose from the sands, the empire of Idris Alooma stood unmatched. Proof that in the heart of Africa's desert, greatness could live, breathe, and rule. For nearly 1,000 years, Kanem-Bornu ruled the heart of the Sahel, a beacon of strength, faith, and learning. But even the most enduring empire cannot escape the turning of time. This is the story of its twilight. When Mai Idris Alooma passed, he left behind order. But without his wisdom, Bornu's unity began to crumble. Greed replaced discipline. Old provinces broke away. Fezzan to the north, Hausa lands to the west. Trade weakened. Gold and salt caravans no longer brought the same wealth. The desert, once their ally, became their prison. In the early 1800s, a storm brewed in the west. Led by the fiery preacher Usman Dan Fodio, the Fulani Jihad swept across Hausaland, cleansing, conquering, transforming. Soon their gaze turned eastward, toward Bornu. But Bornu was not ready to fall quietly. From the ashes rose a new leader, not of royal blood, but of mind and faith. Shehu al-Kanemi, an Islamic scholar and diplomat, stepped forward. He rallied Bornu's people, reformed their armies, and reminded them of who they were. Through letters and reason, he defied the caliphate, declaring, "We follow the true path of Islam. You have no right to call us infidels." And with sword and scripture, Bornu fought back, saving itself from destruction. In 1814, Shehu al-Kanemi founded a new capital, Kukawa. From here, Bornu began again. Its scholars wrote books of law and science. Its merchants reopened the trade roads. Its warriors defended the Sahel once more. For a moment, the empire breathed again, reborn through faith and resilience. But power, once shared, breeds jealousy. The old royal family Adamaya resented al-Kanemi's rising dynasty. Bornu became a realm divided between crown and turban. Civil war tore through Bornu's heart. The line of the Mai ended. The al-Kanemi dynasty took the throne, but the empire's glory was gone. Then came the final blow, not from the west, but from the east. Rabia Zubair, a Sudanese warlord armed with modern weapons, swept into Bornu from Wadai. He conquered Kukawa, killed the sultan, and declared himself ruler. Bornu's 1,000-year empire was shattered. For centuries, Bornu had resisted desert storms, but it could not withstand the iron of the new age. Only years later, the French and the British arrived, carving their empires over the bones of the old ones. Bornu was divided, its independence erased from maps. By the dawn of the 20th century, the Kanem-Bornu Empire, once the pride of Africa's Sahel, was no more. Yet empires never truly die. Their spirit flows through their people. The Kanuri, the Shuwa, the Buduma still remember the land of Mai Idris Alooma, the justice of Alooma, the intellect of al-Kanemi, the courage of the Bornu horsemen. These live on, not as monuments, but as memory. Long before the world spoke of empires and crowns, Bornu ruled the sands, the trade, and the spirit of a people. It rose, fell, and rose again, proving that Africa's story is not of darkness, but of endurance. And as the wind whispers across the Sahel, it still carries the name of a forgotten empire, Kanem-Bornu. The Kanem-Bornu Empire, its walls have fallen, but its memory still breathes, in every desert wind, in every heartbeat of the Sahel. From Kanem's cradle to Bornu's throne, their legacy still whispers. Strength, faith, and resilience. Dedicated to the spirit of Kanem-Bornu, 1,000 years of African greatness. If this story inspired you, help keep Africa's heritage alive. Please subscribe to the channel so more people can discover our forgotten history. Leave a comment. Tell us what part of Kanem-Bornu's story moved you most. Share this documentary. Let the world know Africa's empires were never silent. And don't forget to like, to show your support for the heritage that still lives in us all.